time right now in League of Legends because Jhin is being released. And I thought this would be a perfect time to release a guide or how to play type video for this champion because I feel like he will be very popular and a lot of people will want to try and play him. So the goal of this video is to essentially just give you the information that you need in order to jump into a game and know what to do with this champion. Whether that's just knowing the strengths and weaknesses of Jhin, the items, runes, masteries, tips and tricks and things like that. So hopefully your first games with the Virtuoso are gonna be positive. So the question of this video is gonna be a simple one. Are you playing Jhin mid lane or bot lane and why? And make sure to show that like button some love if you end up enjoying this video and want to see more like it. So the first thing I like to usually talk about in videos like these are the positives and negatives of the champion overall, just to more or less set the foundation of the champion. So from my experience, the positives of Jhin is, well, he has a very strong level 1 and level 2 due to his Q harass and his massive auto attack damage, mainly because of the 4th auto attack being a critical strike. A lot of champions are not able to match the damage output you have at level 1 or level 2, especially if you land your W at level 2 with the auto attack already on them. So with that, I like to go for first bloods quite often, especially if I'm mid lane with Ignite. But speaking of mid lane, well, he can be played in 2 roles quite successfully. Now whether you're playing him mid lane or bot lane is really up to you, and we'll talk about which one I think is better in just a little bit. But I mean, overall, some of the positives are quite obvious. I mean, he is a sniper champion, so naturally he has massive range on his W and his ultimate. And if I'm not mistaken, his W is apparently the longest non-ultimate ranged ability in the entire game. Now his Q ability can be somewhat just okay, but if you end up using it to its full potential by actually stacking the Q on every single jump, with the 4th jump being the max amount of damage that also jumps on the champion, well, I think it is obvious that it will do quite a bit of damage and it will be more or less your main form of harass in the laning phase and even in some team fights. But another thing I like about his W is that if your ally were to auto attack a champion, well, it also puts the mark on that champion, to which you can then use your W to further snare them. So I personally find that to be a very big plus. His E ability is also quite useful because it does cover a decent AoE whenever it does proc. It is invisible, it slows, it does a lot of damage if you maintain the champion within the AoE, and there's also some nice synergy between his E and his W. And then you have the grand finale, his ultimate, Curtain's Call. Now this one is quite amazing because not only does it do a lot of damage, not only does it have very long range and also provides a slow, but the last shot of his ultimate is a normal critical strike. Now if you don't know, his passive actually reduces his auto attack critical strike damage, and it does stack multiplicatively, so if you were to get Infinity Edge, well, it's not going to add a flat 50% bonus to his critical strike damage. In fact, it'll still stay below 200%, which is the standard critical strike damage amplification for most champions. But his ultimate is a standard 200% critical strike bonus damage and 250% with Infinity Edge, which is quite cool. Now the negatives of Jhin is, well, his reload time is going to be a nuisance every now and then, because unlike Graves, attack speed will not reduce the time it takes Jhin to reload. It is a set amount of time and there's nothing you can do about it, so it will take some getting used to. He also has no escape, so he's very vulnerable to assassin type champions or champions that have a lot of mobility, so maybe like Zed, Talon, Rengar, Riven, Lee Sin, and things like that. His W's width is quite narrow, so even though it does have great range, it can still be quite difficult to land. But next I want to talk to you guys quickly about mid lane versus bot lane and where I think you should be playing Jhin, the positives and negatives of playing him in either of the roles. Because this is a topic I've seen being discussed around the community for quite some time, ever since Jin's announcement. So I will personally be playing him mid lane more than bot lane, but that's just because I enjoy mid lane a lot more. And I truly feel like Jin's playstyle seems to be much more fitting of a mid lane type champion because he has a lot of burst damage every now and then, which is similar to maybe like a mage in mid lane. He has a lot of range, a lot of siege, and he's someone that wants to kind of chill way far back, dealing a lot of damage from afar and only going in for the kills when he has to. But with that being said, he does have quite a bit of poor matchups in the mid lane, so any assassin for that matter, Fizz, Zed, Talon, LeBlanc, it will prove to be quite a difficult lane. So that's the only thing that's kind of holding me back from saying, yeah, play him mid lane and don't even think about bot lane. But on the other side of the coin, if we were to look at bot lane, I don't think his playstyle fits bot lane because again, he doesn't have consistent damage like many other marksmen do, maybe like Lucian or maybe someone like Jinx. so it is somewhat of an awkward fit. However, with that being said, having a support with you the whole time, maybe peeling you and setting you up to deal your crazy amount of damage is very nice. So it's really difficult to say which lane is better, but personally I prefer mid lane because I feel like I can go in for the first bloods quite easily with Ignite, but if you play in bot lane, it is overall just safer and you are more guaranteed to be useful. Alright, now before we get into the items, the runes, and the masteries, I want to also quickly talk about just overall general tips and tricks and things that I recommend you keep in mind whenever playing Jhin. So the first very important thing to keep in mind is whenever you're using Q, whether it's in a duel, in a team fight, or any scenario that requires you to output a lot of damage, you want to try to either use auto attack, Q, auto attack, or Q and then your auto attack to essentially cancel the animation of the previous action. And this kind of goes without saying, yet it's also very important. Pay attention to the shots you have left. Make sure you don't put yourself in the potential of being in a scenario where you need extra damage from your auto attacks, but you simply cannot because you have to reload. So you want to try and make sure you think at least a couple steps ahead. Also, in a best case scenario, try to auto a champion on the third shot, proc the passive with your W to snare them, and then hit them again with the fourth shot, and also in between throwing in a Q to deal maximum damage to that opponent. So here you see me auto attack followed by W to snare the Nunu. I throw the Q on the 2 low HP minions to buff the damage, which then goes on Nunu for bonus damage, and luckily for me the fourth shot is enough to kill him while Dangerous Game saves my life. Also, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I recommend being aggressive with Jhin within the first few levels, maybe level 1 or even level 2, when you get your W, especially with the Q, because you have so much damage output, you can snare them, your crit is insane, and I do recommend trying to practice that. Now when it comes to Jin's ultimate, if you are able to land at least one of the shots, the rest of them should be fairly easy to land thanks to the slow. Now if the opponent has some form of escape, whether it's flash or a built-in ability like Ezreal E, I mean yeah, it will still be quite difficult. But if they have no escape and you land maybe the second shot of your ultimate, the other 3 should be fairly easy to land as long as you keep firing them as fast as possible. And even though Jin's ultimate is designed to do bonus damage to lower HP targets, you shouldn't always look at it that way. It's fantastic at securing kills and getting low HP targets, but it's also fantastic at setting up kills. Now if an opponent is full HP but maybe out of position and your team is fairly close to them, start up your ultimate, start hitting them, slowing them down, and your team will follow up and they can secure a kill, much like on the Fiddlesticks you saw right there. And the final thing I want to talk with you guys about in this specific section of the video are the combos. Now the ones I have listed there are just a few, but there's one I really want to go over that I think is just a really solid overall great combo to go in for the full kill. This clip will be taken from my Jhin montage, so excuse the little extra effect I added at the end of this clip. But I think it's a great way to demonstrate what you can really do with his abilities and go for a full kill on a target. So let's take a look at that one more time in slow motion. So I auto attack the Z with my third auto attack, proc the passive with my W, he's snared. I throw the Q so it starts jumping on him before he gets too far away. It gets powered up by one minion. I auto attack him with the fourth auto attack for the crit and set up the ultimate knowing he has no escapes and get the kill. Fairly simple, yet very clean of a combo that I expect to see in many Jhin players. Alright, so the part I'm sure most of you have been waiting for. What exactly do I build on this guy? What are the runes? What are the masteries? So there's going to be 2 different rune pages and 2 different mastery pages I'll talk to you guys about. The first rune page is Armor Pen Reds, Flat Armor Yellows, Flat AD Quints, 6 CDR per level blues for 10%, and then the rest are MR. While the other page is very similar, but instead of having CDR in the blues, you just have flat MR or MR per level. If you're keen on getting the 40% CDR on Jhin, obviously you want the page with the 10% CDR. If you don't really care too much about it, and I don't feel like you should, get the other page with the extra MR. And then moving into the masteries, again 2 pages, one that goes into ferocity, one that goes into cunning. Now you'll notice I don't put fervor of battle in any of these because I simply do not recommend it. Jhin does not auto attack very frequently. He auto attacks every now and then, but each auto attack hurts a lot, and I think fervor of battle is a lot better on champions that can auto attack often and consistently proc it. So getting Warlord's Bloodlust is quite fantastic because you are technically critting from level 1 thanks to your 4th auto attack. Or if you want that early game aggression and just flat out destroy the laning phase, Thunderlords is a great option. Especially if you're playing mid lane with Ignite and you're trying to go for that first blood within the first couple of levels, the extra burst from Thunderlords is very welcoming. And as for items, well, I mean, here you go. The starting items, I usually like to go for the Dorans and an HP potion. It works for me, it gives me what I need, I like it. Now in terms of core items, I almost always recommend you go Infinity Edge, your boots of choice, though I usually recommend Zerkers. Rapid Fire Cannon is an absolute beauty on Jhin, and then you have Essence Reaver for the critical strike damage and the CDR. But then when it comes to choosing your other items, most scenarios I do recommend the Mercurial Scimitar because the QSS effect will help someone like you who's very immobile. It gives you Life Seal, it gives you MR, and I mean honestly Mercurial Scimitar is among the best AD items whether you're a marksman or an AD assassin. After that, I recommend getting either Hurricane, which is fantastic if the enemy team doesn't have a whole lot of champions that can just simply jump on you and destroy you, or you can go for the Phantom Dancer if the assassins tend to jump on you and you can maybe auto attack them for the effect and reduce the damage that they deal to you. So I recommend choosing between those three items if possible, obviously Last Whisper if they have an abundance of tanks and armor. But you also have Youmuu's there in the mix because I mean if you're snowballing early game and you want to maybe get this item to snowball further, yeah, it's not too bad, though I wouldn't highly recommend it, only if you really know what you're doing. So under that I have an example build path so you guys have an idea of in what order you should build these items. Again, I like to go for the Infinity Edge first, so you go for the BF Sword for the raw damage, Pickaxe, finish off the Infinity Edge, go for your boots of choice, and then you definitely want to start working towards that Rapid Fire Cannon because man, it is just so good on Jhin. And other than that, I feel like the build path should be more or less self-explanatory. But what abilities do I level on Jhin? I mean, do I max W second? Do I max E second? Do I even max Q first? Well, from my experience with Jhin so far, this is what I have come to in terms of a conclusion. Level 1, I almost always put a point into Q, and I actually end up maxing Q as well because it's just the best form of harass, it's your main wave clear, and it really is your best ability for the first half of the game. Level 2, I almost always put a point in W because again, if I'm going for that first blood, if I'm going for the aggressive play, the snare is absolutely crucial. Now especially in mid lane at level 3, if I'm facing a jungler that's known to be aggressive, maybe someone like Lee Sin or Nidalee, I'd invest a point into E and then start placing traps around your lane. If you're facing a relatively slow or passive jungler, maybe something like Warwick, I mean if that champion even still exists in the jungle, or any other champion that doesn't tend to gank very often, put another point into Q and be a bit more aggressive in the lane. But regardless, I almost always max my Q first, then I max W second because I like the increased root duration on the W per level. And then I start maxing out the E after and ultimate whenever I can. I personally look at his E ability more of a utility type ability, not something I really rely on when it comes to damage. And with all that being said, let's go to the final part of the video, my final rating. So I decided to give Jhin a solid 8 out of 10 because I feel like he is a very strong champion, but only if you let him be strong. He has quite a bit of counters. I mean, any champion that can just jump on you and kill you is going to be killing Jhin quite successfully. He's very immobile, he has no escapes, his ultimate quite literally makes him sit in one spot. And especially if you're playing him mid lane, I highly recommend trying to pick him only if you already know what the enemy mid laner is playing, or if you're just taking the gamble that they won't play an assassin. But with assassins being quite popular right now, I mean, you shouldn't really gamble on that too much. But regardless, I do feel like Jhin has an insane amount of damage, his E ability is fantastic, his ultimate can set up a lot of plays, his passive when it comes to the 4 auto attacks is huge, and I'm really looking forward to how Jhin will play out throughout the season and just when people start playing him more and more and more. So that is it for my Jhin guide and how to play this champion. So if you did enjoy this video, thought it was informative,